Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble. Today, we are chatting with Rob Carney. Rob has been listed as one of the top 30 coaches to look out for in 2021 in the New York City Journal. Rob teaches the foundations of wellness and the basics of growing your own food so that you can embody a holistic lifestyle. Rob is a CHEK Holistic Lifestyle Coach and the host of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast. Rob believes that health is true wealth and guides his clients to invest in themselves. We are happy to be chatting with you today.
Well, Karan and Kristen, thank you for having me. As soon as you reached out with the name, the Pirate Living Podcast, I was like, there's something here I gotta tap into because you don't really hear about pirates anymore. So it piqued my interest just from the very name, and I'm excited to chat with you both today.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And Karan can go on for a while about where that came from.
See other podcast episodes for my rant about pirates.
So, Rob, we'd love for you to tell us, take us on a journey of what started you on your path to holistic health and what brought you on your pirate life today.
Sure. So, obviously it's tough to encapsulate a whole life story in just a few minutes here, but I'll do my best to give the highlight reels. So for me, I'm 28 years old right now, and this is just over 10 years ago. I had a pretty bad concussion when I was 17. And that was, kind of the life-changing point for me, where at that point I was an athlete. I was a state swimmer. I played lacrosse. I loved playing pickup basketball and just being active. And then it was about, 5.5 months of having these concussive-like symptoms where I couldn't do any sort of physical activity without getting dizzy, lightheaded, or anything like that. And so, I went to all these doctors, all these specialists who were giving me patches and pills and kind of giving me not the greatest advice as it wasn't really working. And so I kind of had this idea of like, there has to be a better way. There's got to be a different way to go about this healing than what I'm being told right now. So someone along the lines, asked me, have you ever done yoga? And, a 17-year-old guy, we're talking 10, 11 years ago, was not the most popular thing for a young guy to be doing yoga classes. But I said, hey, there's not much to lose. I'd show up, be the only guy there with a lot of moms at the YMCA. And I went to University of New Hampshire my first 2 years of college, and I was the first guy to join the UNH yoga club. And remember the master like, are you in the right place? Like, this is yoga, right? And so this whole, rabbit hole was opened up once I dove in there, because that got me into meditation, into mindfulness, led to nutrition, psychology, neuroscience, just basically then looked to learn everything I possibly could about the human system. So I interned or worked for, 2 holistic nutritionists, acupuncturists, massage therapists. I ended up getting my Reiki certification, did my Thai massage training this, a few years ago, and really just went down this personal development journey. Just anybody that would teach me, whether that was me working for free or for pay, I just wanted to pick their brains and learn as much as I could and kind of blend all these pieces together, because I recognized that, let's just say acupuncture is a great tool, but I personally don't believe that's the one all be all for everything, but it's an incredible tool to have in the toolbox. So I basically started working with those different people and started building up my toolbox. And that's kind of why I like to look at all these different wellness practices, is that, there's no master key. But if we can have the toolbox with all the wrenches, the hammers, all these different tools we use for the appropriate challenge, we're going to be well equipped to face any challenge that life will throw our way. So fast forward a little bit, I transferred to UMass Amherst in Western Mass in my junior year after taking a class called ecogastronomy, which is the study of food and food systems. That led me to sustainable agriculture courses and started diving into the next level, which is the soil health, how that affects plant health, human health, animal health, etc. So ended up graduating from UMass Amherst with a degree in sustainable food and farming, took a bunch of herbalism courses, all these different courses, worked on a number of farms. In 2017, I went to Asia, spent about 4.5 months there in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines. and then came back and had a very hard time, which I always knew. I had a hard time working a real job. Was never one to sit at a desk, was never one to sit still. I did landscaping all through my summers of college, basically anything to avoid having that 9-to-5 job. And, I always had some entrepreneurial tendencies, sold some Pokemon cards from my childhood, and, sold some marijuana on the side at times in my younger years, and, basically anything I could do to not work a real job. So fast forward, moved to LA in 2018 with a startup company that didn't start up. Came back about 10 months later with 10 grand in credit card debt, and decided I was done, doing this, working other people's dreams, and started my own business about 3 years ago, September 2018. And there's been a lot of ups and downs since then. Obviously, starting our own business, I worked part-time leading an after-school program for kids, teaching them mindfulness and gardening for about a year and a half in the mix there. And the past year and a half, I've been fully on my own and doing the best I can to share the knowledge of health, wellness, and teaching people about growing their own food.
That's awesome. And I want to go back to these Pokemon cards for a minute. Tell us a little about selling those, and were they worth like a decent amount when you were selling them?
So I was a fanatic of Pokemon growing up. So I remember coming to this is actually backtracking a lot. I think I was probably 10 or 12 years old. My parents had a yard sale at my grandparents' house. And I remember I had a binder of all of these Pokemon cards, and I was selling them individually. Then I, got bored of being there. So I went to go play or do whatever I was doing. I remember coming home later that day, and my mom was like, "Oh yeah, I sold the whole binder. I got you $10. And I was like, "Mom, one of those cards could have been worth $10. But I didn't realize I left it there. So that was like half of my stash. So then that was kind of unfortunate. But then I remember years later remembering, and this is, when I came back from LA, I was like, man, I got to scrape for some money anywhere I can with 10 grand in debt. And so, some of them would sell for a couple bucks, some of them would sell for $10, $20. But, if I was selling a few of those a week, that added up, and it was basically me just going to the mail every so often. So I'd say they range anywhere from I think the most expensive one I sold was like $30. So anywhere from like $2 to $30, but hey, when you got hundreds of them, that can add up. So it's definitely a very much a little hustle, but selling a few cards a week, it adds up.
And that's dedication.
And it's also just like getting rid of some of the old stuff at my parents' house. Like I got some stuff in here, I might as well have some fun and sell it. So.
So I'm really interested in hearing, like, what does your coaching practice look like right now?
Yeah.
You talked about working with kids and stuff, but what is it? Yeah. Sorry.
So right now it's mostly focused on group coaching. So I've really made the transition. I was doing one-on-one coaching for quite some time, and which I enjoy. But I think right now people need community more than ever. And we have a group out here in the Boston area called Ice and Iron, where we do monthly meetups as well. So we'll do ice baths, cold exposure type of stuff. We have a sauna. We'll do breath work, workouts, working in. That's actually where, we said our mutual friend, Ryan Sprague, he comes to those every month. So for me, the coaching right now is mostly group coaching. I just launched that pretty recently, transitioning more so into that community aspect. And so that's, we're looking at the 6 foundation principles of the CHEK system, which is moving, thinking, breathing, nutrition, hydration, and sleep. We're looking at, purpose. We did a breath work session last week. So really sharing all these tools I've accumulated over the years. And right now the main focus as we're kind of getting it started is, helping people find their purpose, helping people find exactly what they want to focus on. Because I find that if we don't have, for a pirate analogy, if our sailboat isn't targeted on the right target, then we're just going to let the wind sweep us, all over the place. And we could be thinking we're aiming for Florida and we end up in Africa because we, didn't really have a clear direction. So, helping people find that direction, because I found that, me having a clear view of what I want to do with my life has fundamentally changed my daily actions, how I go about things, how I overcome challenges. And not to say I'm perfect by any means. There's a lot of work that is constantly being done. And, so it's a lot of it is building that community, letting people share. Because I think a lot of times we bottle things in. So even just holding the space for people to express what they're working on, speak that into existence, and then can make a profound impact.
Mm-hmm. So with Ice and Iron, is that monthly that you do that?
Yep. So that's monthly in Quincy, Mass, which is just south of Boston. It's like on the outskirts of the city. And so we do that monthly, and it's like a 3-4 hour kind of like half day retreat in a sense, which people get together, circle up, set the intentions, do Tai Chi for 10-15 minutes to, as we call, working in the energy, building that up. And then we'll work out for 45 minutes, an hour. We got tires, kegs, maces, clubs, like basically an adult playground is the idea, is to let people play. And that could be working out, that could be doing yoga, having fun, doing whatever. Then we go into breath work for about 45 minutes. Then we go on the ice, we go sauna, we circle back up, and it's, a mini retreat. And we actually have one on Halloween, coming right up in a few days here. So we're going to have a costume party for that. So that'll be fun too. So maybe there'll be a pirate there. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. What, with the work that you're doing, what is your social rebellion that you're looking to start, or have you started?
I mean, I think right now it's crazy to even say that being somebody who is believing in natural health is a form of rebellion these days, and saying like, hey, I can get people together in a community and we're not all sick human beings. We actually have, healthy immune systems, and we're able to get together, and that's actually good for immunity. Dr. Shivo says community boosts immunity. We get together, we're sharing those healthy bacteria, we're sharing laughs, we're sharing, commonalities, and we're actually boosting our immune system by being together. So I think in this era of lockdowns we find ourselves in, and the idea that natural health is a conspiracy, I think that getting people together to focus on improving their health naturally, which if you asked me a few years ago, I definitely would say that's not any form of rebellion. That should just be the norm. But apparently in this day and age we're living in, that has become an active rebellion. So, kind of recognizing, hey, I think that truth goes over any sort of mandates or ideas that these politicians flip-flop on every single day, and what the latest science is, and kind of following that intuition and balancing that with science, of course, not neglecting it, but kind of following the truth and the intuition a little bit more than what the mainstream media may be telling us.
The natural immunity, I worked, I taught for many years, but specifically I worked in a childcare center for 6 years. And my first year there, I was getting everything. Like I got every cold, I got every flu bug that came through, and I was constantly stuffed up. But after a year, I was like, I'm good to go. Kids could come in with whatever. And I was staying healthy because, the kids especially are really good at bringing in every bug and building up your immune system. But
yes, they are.
Yeah, it was interesting to be able to see that and experience it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I was leading that after school program, it is a childcare center. So kids are anywhere from, babies up until 11 years old. And I was leading the after school, which is 5 to 11-year-olds. But, like you said, these kids have snot running down their face. And I remember, I have a pretty healthy immune system, but anytime we come in contact with something foreign, there's a chance that we may come down with something, especially if we're working hours, we're under stress, we're not taking care of ourselves, not getting enough sleep. And I remember my first, like you said, first few months working there, I actually got sick for the first time in a long time. And I was like, wow, I kind of forgot that this is a thing. But then after that, I'd be holding a kid that's snot all over his face, and it'd be fine. And I think that that's also part of it is, it's that hormetic stress. It's just like going into an ice bath. It's a little bit of acute stress that then stimulates the growth in our body, builds up resilience. And so it's kind of sad to me to see this aversion to any sort of stress that we're coming into, because part of that is also we live in a world of chronic stress right now. But I think people tend to avoid those acute stressors, which are fundamentally why we're here as a human species, that ability to adapt to acute stressors, utilize that fight or flight response in a healthy way to overcome, to adapt, and ultimately grow stronger. So I think it is, very important for people to seek out those acute stressors in our life, and, really to mitigate those chronic stressors that we're constantly exposed to.
Yeah. So you've been doing a lot of work like with teaching people new things, or maybe not even new things, but teaching people things that we've forgotten about too. What are some uncomfortable questions that either you've asked yourself along the way, or you encourage your clients to ask?
It's a great question. Uncomfortable questions. The first thing that pops in my head is why. I think that people can give a reason, and I can ask the why question about 10 times and usually get a different answer every single time as we start to peel back those layers. And I think sometimes, it's almost like being a little kid, a little kid, like, why? But if you say to somebody, hey, like, why do you think that you're overweight? Oh, because, X, Y, and Z. Okay, so why do you think that is? Okay, so why do you think that is? And just peeling back those layers. And those can be uncomfortable for people because, for me, part of my job as a coach is to ask questions and to pry a little bit, because a lot of people kind of sit on that surface level of, oh, the first thing came in my head, that must be the answer. It's like, well, hold on, maybe, but maybe not. Let's try to dig a little bit deeper. So I think a lot of it is just the prying, which just can be leading to uncomfortable questions that I can't think of off the top of my head. But I think just kind of not accepting people's initial answer at face value and really trying to find the layers behind that can be uncomfortable. It's less comfortable for me. It's more comfortable for me now that I've done it more. But I think with new clients, it's always uncomfortable in the beginning, especially if they've never been asked some of these things before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. I remember when I very first started coaching and really started to asking those whys and digging in with clients. And I remember a client, he was 56 years old and he wanted to start nutrition work with me. And, his why at first was, I just want to lose a little weight, or I just want to get a little healthier. And it took, really digging in and it took a few sessions because I was still new at it to discover that his mom had passed away at 57 and that his big fear was that he was going to turn 57 and pass away the way his mom did. But if I didn't dig into that and really, hone into what his actual fear was or the reason he was there, none of that would have worked, because it would have been, oh, I just want to lose, 30 pounds. That's not the real reason that we're here.
Right. And it's always so interesting to me, just exactly like you said, that when we start to ask these questions, and people, a lot of times they don't even think that that's the right answer. They're just talking. They're kind of just venting. And that's like, that's it. Maybe he didn't openly express like, I want to get healthier because of this, but just you being able to make that connection. It's amazing how so many aspects of our lives are connected. I think that's a big thing that I really like to harp on with people is that, hey, if you go for a walk and let's just say the weight loss goal is the goal. Yeah, it may help you lose weight, but it's also going to help you be more disciplined. It's also going to help you lower stress. It's also going to help you with your breathing. And we can go into all these different reasons why all these things are connected. I think that's what I love about the idea of holistic health is it's a whole system that's working together. And again, like I was saying, when I was studying with these nutritionists or these acupuncturists, like these are all great in my opinion. I think we need people to specialize in those areas. But for me, whole health connections, the idea of that is I'm good at connecting things together. I'm good at connecting people together. I'm not great at saying, hey, this is the one thing I'm going to hone in on, but I'm pretty good at bringing multiple areas together and kind of bring them under one roof to put them in a tangible way, doing my best not to overwhelm people. But I think that when we recognize all these things are together, from the thoughts we have on our head to the past experiences that we maybe have not dealt with, to the food we're putting in our body, it's all affecting us at a cellular level, at a mental, emotional, spiritual level.
Yeah, I like that. We're looking at it from the big picture. I have clients that would come to me again for nutrition and expect macros, like how much, what should I eat? Exactly how much should I eat? And I'm like, you need to take a walk every day. Right. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, you get 2,000 steps a day and you haven't seen any sunlight and you're wondering why you can't sleep at night. So I'm like, let's start there. So it is really about that big picture, and not, like you said, not just focusing in on that, like the minute detail. Like if you have 120 grams of carbs or 150 grams of carbs at this point in your life, it doesn't really matter. I just need you to go for a walk. Right. So I love that you're talking about the big picture, because I think sometimes we, especially as coaches, we miss that, and we hone in on like whatever our specialty is, and we forget, but like you said, about the whole toolbox.
Right. And I think, oftentimes people may come to us thinking that they want something from us, but we end up giving them something completely different, but it then solves that initial issue they had before. So I think it's, the idea of like not giving them what they want, but giving them what they need. They want nutritional coaching, but what they need is to go for a walk. They need to move their body. They need to get outside. They need to focus on their breathing. They need to get sunshine, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's really important and that's come back to those uncomfortable, conversations is, hey, just because you're coming to me for nutrition, I'm going to give you, recommendation for something else. That may be uncomfortable because this person's like, oh, well, I'm not hiring you for that. I'm hiring you for nutrition. But at the end of the day, I think comes down to that level of communication. And, if we can educate people and share that message that, hey, this is all connected, and we'll get to the nutrition stuff a little bit later, but, we got to start here first and get the foundation set before trying to build a skyscraper.
And we also like to say walking is integration. So after doing a coaching session or group call, we like to encourage people to go out and take walks without any the devices. So take a walk, be with yourself, and integrate what you've learned. So walks are multifaceted.
Well, I love that too, because one habit that I really do my best to embark on every day is after a meal is going for a walk for same reason, integrating the food into my body, allowing for digestion. And I noticed that if I eat a meal and come and sit at my desk, I start getting bloated. I start getting gassy. It's like a stagnant pool. Like there's no movement going on. But if I go for a walk after, I feel phenomenal. And I think that that's a big thing, that we have so much bogged down in our bodies. And, right now where I'm adding a little bit of muscle, I'm eating a lot more calories than typical. So if I eat all these calories and then just sit, that's not going to be the best thing for me. And same thing, like you're saying, after a coaching call, if you have this incredible coaching call, you just took all this information, brain food in, and then you're just sitting, probably going on your phone, probably going back to whatever you're doing before, you're not allowing your body to move through those things, to digest that mental food and assimilate that. So again, coming back to all these things are connected. I think that walking, like you said, is one of my favorite tools. And I love the idea of what you said is walking after a call. For me, it's walking after a meal. I like to take a few breaths before a call. Before we got on here, I hit join just to make sure it's the right length. Then, you saw it took me like 30 seconds to sort of join it, take a few minutes just to breathe, or a few seconds to breathe, just to ground myself and let go of what I was doing before. Because, if there was stress before, I don't want to bring that baggage into the next activity I'm doing. I want to let that go, before I dive into the next thing. And I forget who says it. Maybe it's Brendan Burchard. He says, set an intent, release tension and set intention. So before you go to a new thing, release the tension from what you're doing before and set the intention for the new task. And that little practice can take 30 seconds, can take a minute, but I think it really can change everything, instead of just carrying over the baggage or the stress from whatever we were doing before and just hitting the reset button before a new task.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. That's something I hadn't thought of before. So now I have that to look forward to.
Awesome.
Yeah, one of our favorite things to do between actual podcasts, we usually record two in a day. Usually we end up sending each other selfies from our walks.
Nice.
It's pouring rain, but here we are walking. So what are some of the small or big bold actions that you've taken to get you to where you are today?
Great question. So I'd say for me, I've always been a bit of a risk taker, not like a crazy risk taker, but, not doing the safe route per se, buying my one-way ticket to Asia with no plan on coming home until I ran out of money was, not the safe way, not the smart way, as somebody would, a lot of people told me it's not smart, that's not safe, that's not whatever. But I knew for me, that was something I had to do, and it was something I wanted to do. And I knew that I would have an immense amount of growth that was not tangible in terms of financially. Same thing with going to LA. I got this offer to join the startup company, and in a matter of 2 weeks, I drove across the country, packed up my car and went over there. No idea where I was living, slept on couches for the first 6 weeks I was out there with some friends of a friend's family friend, just like crazy connection, slept on the couch, never met him before. Join that startup company. And so for me, I think it's taking risks for me, I think is important. And it's a little bit different now that I'm in a more of a serious relationship. And back then I was single and there was not really anybody else that I could potentially hurt in the process. If I ended up going 10 grand in credit card debt or couldn't pay for rent, I could always move back with my parents or whatever. This is 4 or 5 years ago. And so, I think that taking risks has always been a big thing. And I always want to invite people to, take some of those risks, and maybe not the risk that I took, because for some people that could crush them mentally in terms of if they don't have that financial security, don't have that stability. And I recognize that some things I've done are definitely not for everybody. But, I always recommend is find that comfort zone and just, take a step beyond that. Like, here's the ledge, take one step. Like, don't jump off the ledge, but maybe hang off the ledge and put your legs over the ledge and kind of feel that discomfort setting in and actively seeking those discomforts. And I remember I used to have a fear of heights for a while, and I was a on-call firefighter for about 3 years. And I remember I had to climb to the top of this 120-foot ladder and, scare the crap out of me. Once I was up there, I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then I remember a couple of years later, went to the Grand Canyon, and, seeing it from afar, I was like, holy crap, that is a long drop. So I scooched myself to the edge and sat and looked over the edge of the Grand Canyon, which, my whole world is like, woo, just adrenaline, fear, just chaos in my brain. But I remember just sitting there like, I'm just going to feel through this, because heights have been a fear of mine. So if I can sit here and I know I'm safe, have my hands behind my back, got my legs over the edge, and I'm looking back, like, I know I'm okay, but just kind of embracing those areas of discomfort and taking some of those risks, I think, is really important for our personal growth, and also just shows us we're a lot more capable than we think we are. And a lot of times we think, I need this, I need that, I need this gadget, I need this tool, I need this comfort. But then when we throw ourselves into the unknown, I think it really allows ourselves to see what's behind that comfort layer and really shine through our true self.
Yeah. One thing I've heard too is the body doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. So excitement, what could be excitement could also be perceived as fear. The body isn't sure what that is. So to test those boundaries as well helps get comfortable in that uncomfortable, and helps the body perhaps get excited instead, or be like, oh, this is exciting to me. Oh, I get to try this, instead of stepping back into fear.
Yeah. And I think that's the great example of that is, for anybody that's played sports, is before a big game is you feel that like, you're not like, I'm excited, but I'm also afraid. Like, I'm nervous, but I'm excited. It's like that little, it's on the line, because like you said, it's stimulating a lot of the similar chemicals in the brain, is that fear and excitement. And it's kind of that nervousness, that excitement, that little bit of fear, which also drives us to perform better. That's kind of like the big games is, you think of like the NBA finals or the Super Bowl, you have this really important game you've worked the whole time for, and you're probably a little nervous, you're probably a little bit excited, but you notice the people that have been there before, they can hone in that nervousness to excitement. And now you're choosing, hey, I'm actually going to choose the excitement path. I'm not going to choose the nervousness path. I'm going to use these emotions, use these hormones, use these, neurotransmitters that are firing in my body and my brain, and hone that in to actually perform better. And I've always kind of been somebody that likes the pressure. I did swimming, we did a relay. I'd always like to be the last person. I'd always do best when I was the last person, because I liked having that pressure of like, hey, there's nobody else after me. If I don't win the race, we lose the race. So I like that pressure of being like, all right, this is all on me. And it gave me that adrenaline boost, which maybe I was, a little bit of adrenaline junkie, and that's why. But so I think that, having that pressure, if we can hone that in the right direction, can be incredibly beneficial for us.
Karan, I think she was trying to talk, but she was muted.
I'm sorry. I have like WrestleMania with Huskies going on in the background. Don't mind me. So I've been on mute. My question, I actually want to hear more about, what you're doing with growing your own food and teaching in that area.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, when I started studying this and working on farms, I just recognized it was kind of this aha moment that was incredibly simple, but also profound, that why do we need this middleman of a grocery store? Like, to me, it was kind of like, duh, but also at the same time, like, why do I need to drive to a grocery store to get my own food? And kind of recognizing, like, if we're looking at before, World War II, more than half the people were growing their own food, whether that was on a major scale or a minor scale, whether that was just a garden. I think it was like 80% of people had at least a garden, at that point. And then after that, we had, things changed pretty quickly with the chemical agriculture and all that we were growing on bigger scales. It's a whole other story to get into. But for me, I'm also in that flow state when I'm in my garden. I'm solving problems. There's a storm going on right now. I had to go out to tie some of my plants up to make sure the stems don't snap. That's problem solving. That's resilience. That's, I have to be patient because what we plant today isn't going to grow tomorrow. It's going to take days, weeks, months, however long. It's persistence, because sometimes there's rabbits that get through the fence, they eat all my lettuce, and then it's like, oh, this sucks, I want to quit. And then it's like, well, hold on, they need to eat too. Let me just fix the fence. Let me build up the wall, whatever we got to do. And then it's the consistency that if there's no rain and I don't show up every single day, these plants aren't growing. So for me, it's kind of like the spiritual path that I learned these principles through the garden that have really helped me. So I want to help other people find that passion, whether that's gardening or not. But I always say, hey, just grow something. If you can have an herb in your windowsill, cool. I've got I'm renting this house right now, so it's like I can't just tear up the whole lawn and turn it into a garden. But I've got a few nice little garden areas that are going on, and then behind me I've got my indoor grow rack setup going. So in the winter that kind of becomes the main piece there, and it's basically just a storage rack. I tied on some lights, plug them in, adjust the lengths accordingly, put some plants in there, some good soil, good quality water. And, for me, I get basically unlimited chard. I'm a big fan of Swiss chard. I think that it's never as good in the grocery store. So that's like one of the things I always grow, because by the time it gets there, it's always wilted and, dying. So I just kind of grow things that I don't think do well in a grocery store, chard being one of them. And especially in the winter, I try to support local farmers as best I can, but at the end of the day, sometimes I want some exotic things that maybe people aren't growing in during the season. So, I take that upon myself to grow myself. And I got an aloe plant. It's great for sunburns, and got rosemary, and just kind of keep the medicinal tool shed open for my plants. And I just enjoy it. It's really that meditative state, that flow state that I can enter into. And especially when I'm outside, I'm able to connect with the earth, be barefoot, get my hands dirty, solving problems, sunshine on my body. So list goes on and on.
Yeah. Sorry. I was going to say, I love, first of all, that you said like, it could just be a herb garden, right? Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't have to be the big, like full, like hobby farm. And, I just exactly what you were saying. Like, I love to just go to my garden, grab some rosemary or some lemon balm and like steep a cup of tea, and, having those tools right there at your fingertips and knowing what's in it. There's no herbicides, there's no pesticides, like, just having those, like, I don't know, like you said, pure medicines, they're available for you in your own little private medicine cabinet. I think is really powerful. And I would hope more people would do that as well.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be that difficult. I think that's the biggest thing. I made this free ebook. It's like 14 pages called Yes, You Can Grow Your Own Food. And basically the intention is to show people in the most simple way, like all you need is quality soil, quality water, light, and seeds. And if you have those things, which can cost you like, I think the amount of chard I got like $2.65 of organic seeds. That has like 100 seeds. And if I were to get a bushel of organic chard at the supermarket, it's $2.99. So just by me growing one plant, I'm saving that. So you figure I have 100 seeds. I'm essentially 100xing what I could save, by just getting these at the grocery store. So whether you're looking at it from a financial standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, a health standpoint, there's so many different layers we can go into, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. And, I think herbs are a great place to start. Again, put it on a sunny windowsill and pick an herb you like. If you like lemon balm, cool. You like mint, cool. You like oregano, cool. Pick something you like and you're going to use. You're going to be excited to grow that. And then once you figure that one out, cool, maybe get a second one. All right. Then maybe get 3, then maybe get 4, maybe get 5. Then maybe the time you get to 5, it's like, all right, this is all I want. Great. Now you have 5 more herbs that you didn't have before. And if that's your limit, phenomenal. Imagine if we all saved $10 a week on herbs. Hey, that adds up. That's $520 a year. And then, what if also that saves us in gas because we don't have to drive there? Cool. Add another 100 on that. Cool. We're saving $600 a year just by growing 5 herbs. And again, that math is completely, out of left field, but you get the idea is that there's so many different benefits to growing something, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't have to have a grow rack in your house. Eventually I plan to have a whole greenhouse when I buy my own property and have my own outdoor garden. That's basically a homestead. I'm looking to get 40 plus acres and just really transform that land. But that's not everybody's goal. Maybe you want to live in a city. That's not the life I enjoy, but if that's for you, cool. Get some stuff in your windowsill and just start where you're at and use what you have.
The spiritual part, I planted a bunch of wildflowers outside in my yard because I wanted to give the bees and butterflies something, which it's pretty. And there's still maintenance that needs to go in because weeds will come up. And I have lavender and rosemary too that will sprout and go all over if I don't prune them back. So I'll go out there, and as I'm weeding and pulling things up, things start processing through my head. One time I was pruning my lavender. It was close to dying, and I needed to prune back a lot. And I caught myself apologizing to the lavender out loud, saying, "I'm sorry. I know this hurts right now, but you're going to be so much better for it," which it is. It's amazing, like huge right now. And a few weeks later, something happened in my life where it was a big pruning process. And I remembered my conversation with the lavender, and I was like, that was a message to myself as well as the lavender when I said that. So there's been a lot of spiritual connection, even with my wildflowers.
Well, I think that, you hit the nail on the head that how we treat these plants is often a reflection of how we treat ourselves. Because I notice sometimes, this is like if I'm my indoor grow rack, I didn't water them enough. Like maybe I kind of, half-assed the watering that day, and the next day they're looking a little droopy. It's like, oh man, like if I'm half-assing there, where am I doing that to myself and other aspects of my life? Like what was I in such a rush for that I didn't give them the full watering? Okay, so where else in my life am I probably rushing something that's beneficial for myself that I'm, not giving myself? So we can look at the way that we do anything is oftentimes how we do everything. I think that's a big, thing we talk about clutter. If you have a lot of clutter on your desk, what is the clutter you have in your mind? If you have a lot of clutter in your bedroom, where's the clutter you have in your, wherever? So we can really look at all these aspects and see the spiritual side to them as well. And I notice that, when I have a lot of stuff on my desk, my concentration isn't as great because my eyes are kind of like, oh, I should clean that. Oh, and I'll do that after. Oh man, that's in the way too. Oh, I'll do that. And it's just that those little moments of mental, just wastefulness basically. Because what if I just took 5 minutes before I start work and say, hey, I'm just going to clean all this stuff up, and then instead of having 10 seconds here thinking about that, 10 seconds here thinking about that, it all comes together. And I think that's one thing with the garden is we can really get so caught up in that world and just really analyze what's going on there and then reflect that back at ourselves and use it almost as a mirror. And I love the, I love the wildflower aspect as well, because that's, wildflowers are getting decimated by herbicides and all these other things nowadays, and pollinators are steadily declining. So, if anybody doesn't even want to deal with that, you throw some wildflowers out there and, natural to the environment, they'll probably be okay even without watering because they're native to the environment. So you find some native wildflowers. Hey, that's a great place to start as well.
And you get all the bees and butterflies buzzing around.
And they're beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of our favorite things sitting in our little back garden oasis is the hummingbirds.
Mm-hmm.
So we've planted a lot of plants with the intention of attracting the hummingbirds to our garden, and they're just right next to your head. They seem to have no fear of you, and you're just sitting there and hanging out with them, and it's one of my favorite parts of summer.
Yeah, and bringing all these little critters around too is, that's the way that our ecosystem should be working. It shouldn't just be humans and lawns and some bugs. Like we should be having a diverse array of critters coming around. Like we have bunnies in my backyard. There's a woodchuck who I said a lot of 4-letter words to when he was eating a lot of my garden, but at the end of the day, it was like, oh, you could trap it, you could shoot it. And it's like, well, I'm just going to build a fence, that he can't get in, because at the end of the day, who am I to say, oh, this dude just had a buffet because I let him, have his easy access. That's not his fault. That's the animal being smart, saying, well, there's a buffet of food right here. I'm just going to dig in when this human's not around. So if we can recognize, like, when there's diversity, that's a really good sign. There's some hawks that fly around, there's crows that fly around, there's different birds, blue jays. Like, that's a sign of a healthy ecosystem when we have a diversity of critters. So if we can attract more diversity through wildflowers, maybe it's having, hummingbird feeders, maybe it's having a bird bath, something that's going to attract more critters, that's going to help the whole environment. The rabbit poop is great for the soil. So we got bunnies pooping around, they're eating the grass, trimming the grass, then they poop. I actually sometimes just pick it up and put it in my garden when I find piles of rabbit poop, because it's good for the soil. And then all these things work together. So, I think that if we can recognize that we want to bring more diversity to the ecosystem as a whole, and, whether it's intentional with hummingbirds or any other pollinators, like that in and of itself makes a huge difference.
We had our neighbor's dog kept getting under our fence, like digging in, wanting to come visit us. So my landlord came by and was clearing out putting in a fence to keep the dog from coming over. However, he saw all my wildflowers, which I was letting dry out so that the seeds could pop and go into the soil. And he looked at it and he said, I'm going to have my guys come by and clear out some of these weeds. And I had a feeling that he was looking at the flowers as weeds, but I didn't know how much until I came home and they'd cleared out everything in our yard. Like, they took down a couple trees, they took almost all my flowers, and it's like, oh, they're all gone. And he was looking at it as this yard's not clean. And I'm looking at it as I'm bringing in life to the yard. So it was a sad day. It's coming back though, thankfully, now that we've gotten rain.
Good. Yeah, I've had a similar experience when I first moved into this house that I'm renting here back in April. There's a guy that does the lawn and all that type, because we're on like probably 3/4 of an acre here. So it's got a good size yard, but it's, got like a nice little perimeter of trees around it. But yeah, same thing. It's like, I see these wildflowers pop up. I was like, oh, these are beautiful. Then he comes and mows the lawn one time and they're decimated. It's like, they're not even in the way. They're off to the side. And to me, it's like, I don't know. I guess it's just kind of silly to me. It's like, if you see any sort of flower, like, what's the point if it's not in the, like, I get if it's in the middle of the grass. Like, I get that, because you want it to, just not have just bushes of wildflowers in the middle of your lawn, which I disagree with, but I get that from a general perspective. But if it's on the side, it's like, you kind of have to go out of the way to mow those down. So, I was definitely in the same boat where I was a little peeved for a while there, but hey, I started building around it so you couldn't get to it.
Nice.
More importantly, how are y'all getting these landlords that are doing your yard work for you?
Mine only came by because of the dog.
Oh, okay. I'm like, where's my landlord to help me mow my lawn?
I mean, I was okay with the dog, but at the same time, the dog was making my house more home than its own. So.
True. It's something I just read yesterday, and I was wondering, your thoughts on it. But I just saw a map of the US and how much farmland was actually taken up by big corporations rather than family-owned farms. The article is basically saying that they're turning, the family farmers who have to sell their land into basically serfs having to work on the land that they used to own. What's your opinion on, or what are your thoughts on all of that that's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation because, like I said, after World War II, we got into this bad habit of using these chemicals that were once used to kill people in wars. And then we figured, hey, if we dilute these a little bit, they can just be used to kill bugs and all these other pests. But we didn't really quite recognize that, yeah, you're going to get some short-term yield gains because you're not going to have the bugs eating the crops. So then also you start killing the good bacteria in the soil. You start killing the pollinators. And after, I think it's like the first 3 to 4 years of pesticide use, things boom, like they grow so much faster. And then years 4 to 6, they start to decline. 6 to 8, they're really declining. After 8 years, it's just a steady downhill. So, in their defense, in the short term, they saw results. So they saw, well, this is working. We should do more of this. And then it got to this bad habit where they'd done so much destruction that we basically at this point had to repurpose all the farmland we did, because they're monocropping. They're just doing corn or soy or wheat, one crop, which is depleting all those nutrients without putting more nutrition back into the soil. So I think there was some stat like, if you eat one head of lettuce now, as opposed to 80 years ago, you'd have to eat like 400 heads of lettuce to get the same nutrition that was in a head of lettuce like 80 years ago. So when it comes to these giant corporations, we have to recognize that we're in a hole. First and foremost, we are in a hole, and there's the only way to restore that. I don't want to say only way, a productive way to restore that is to focus on small family farms on a smaller scale, because clearly this industrial food system is not working. It's not sustainable. There's a lot of garbage that goes into it. There's a lot of waste. And instead of using nature as a symbiotic piece, we've separated everything. And now these things that would be once solutions, like cow manure, which is great for the soil, but now we have toxic cows and feedlots with too much manure because they're not grazing. It's not being spread evenly. Now manure is an issue. Now we have to figure out, oh, well, what do we do with these manure piles? So now these once solutions have become problems. So if we can recognize that, we can say, okay, so this is where we're at. We have giant corporations who don't give a crap about people's health. All they care about turning a profit. And for them, part of that is because because food is so cheap, because chemicals cost so much, there's not much of a profit gain for a lot of these farmers. So a lot of them are basically working, 60, 80 hours a week to earn a minimum wage salary. So if we recognize there's problems, now we can start looking at solutions. So if we look at all these individual things like the monocultures, we look at the manure that are challenges. So come back to diversity. So if we come back to bringing things together, mimicking nature instead of trying to outsmart nature, we usually have a lot of success on these small to medium scale farms. And there's a great Netflix documentary called The Biggest Little Farm, which I really recommend. Basically, this couple, bought, I think it's like 250 acres in California of an abandoned farm that was once used for non-organic agriculture. It was all depleted, prone to flooding, prone to fires and drought because it was just so decimated. And they basically restored it after, I think it was like 6 years. It was like the most functional piece of land like in the area, that like they'd have species that hadn't been there in decades coming back there because they'd restored the environment. So if we recognize that this is going to take time, it's not a quick fix, and we live in a world of quick fixes, that we want something, we want it now. So we say, hey, this may take 4, 6, 8 years to be a thriving ecosystem, but that's okay, because in the grand scheme of things, if we start that now and it takes 6, 8 years, that's not that long. Let's just say I live to 100, that's 6 or 8% of my life. And in the process, it's not like it's all like terrible. Like, it's not like it's just 6 to 8 years of just wasted effort. You're seeing progress. So when we recognize this is going to take time, it's not going to be a quick fix, and we have solutions, and basically it's just coming back to nature's foundational principles, which is diversity, integration, working things together instead of isolating everything. That's important to start with. And then also recognizing like, hey, if we keep selling away our land to these big corporations, we're going to find ourselves, one, in a monopoly of the food system, which we're getting very close to right now. There's like 4 major food corporations that own like all the farmland, and Bill Gates now is the biggest owner of farmland in the United States, which is crazy that one person who I don't think has the best intentions at times is owning a lot of this land. So if we say, hey, so what happens if right now Nestle has bought up a lot of our water wells and our springs? So what happens if Nestle owns all the water and these giant corporations own all the food? What are they going to start owning all the air next? Like what's the next step? So if we can see the bigger picture, like we're talking about earlier, if we can take a step back and not be emotional about it and be like, oh, these bad people, they're buying all stuff, like they have every right to do that as well. They're trying to build their business. They're trying to grow. They're trying to make more money. It's like, cool. If we recognize that, hey, let's take a step back. Let's nurture the land we have. And rather than saying, maybe I'll sell this to a giant corporation, when you're selling your home, selling your land or whatever, maybe you take a little bit less money, which is not always the answer we want to hear, and sell it to another small farmer. Like, let's say you're selling your plot of land for $500,000, and then you kind of have a small farmer says, hey, I can only give you 450. It's not always the best thing to hear, but sometimes that's the solution we need to do, is say, hey, we got to also act out of integrity and not just put money first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just finished reading a book. I cannot remember the author's name, but it's called The Price of Tomorrow. And it's one of the things that they talk about is if we all actually work together for like the common good, then everybody wins. The problem is that everybody is working for their own personal benefit. So like you said, obviously, I would say, 99% of people trying to sell their farms are going to take the 500,000 because of the personal gain that they're going to have from it, without considering the taking slightly less and what is the benefit for the greater good. So I think that's the unfortunate part of where we need that mind shift, is really people trying to look at what's going to be what's going to help with a greater good rather than just personal gain.
Yeah, and I think part of that as well is, we have no financial education in our school systems at all. When I really think, like, started working with that startup company and I was actually learning some things about business, I was like, wow, I know nothing. And I still feel like, all these years later, I basically know nothing about business because we were never taught anything in our school systems. It's like, we use an old school system that was basically made to make factory workers who followed orders. Like, we're not breeding people in the traditional school system to make leaders or creating followers. But, we need the balance of everything, but recognize, like, hey, there should be a little bit more, in my opinion, there should be a little bit more freedom as to what kids want to learn, and have a little bit more diversity than learning about trigonometry and things that I don't think I've ever used since I was in high school. So if we give people a little bit more of that education financially, you may recognize that, hey, if you sell this, just using Nestle, your natural spring for $100,000 to them today, if you held on to that for 10 more years, it may be worth $200,000 later. Or if you held on that for life and made a business out of that selling spring water, you may make $500,000 over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of that is just, we're kind of bred to have that level of scarcity and kind of that, like I was saying, instant gratification. So if we can educate people financially and also educate people with their health, again, we're one of the sickest, most overweight countries in the world, who have the most like calories per capita, I think, out of any country. So we need health education. We need business education. I think the two go together, though. A lot of times when we're not healthy, we're not thinking clearly either. And we're in that reactive fight or flight mode. So if we can get people healthy, get ourselves grounded, connected to nature, putting good fuel into our body, we're probably going to make better decisions that are for the greater good in general. Because when we're feeling better and not acting out of that greed, that scarcity mode, usually we make better decisions that influence everybody at a higher level.
I'm curious, what did you do in the schools with teaching kids with gardening?
Yeah, so that was a great experience. And I've always loved working with kids. I've, worked with kids at a few different schools, and, I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. I'm the third oldest of 15 cousins. So I feel like I've always just kind of been, around younger kids, and I've always enjoyed, being with kids, playing with kids, and kind of just, sharing what I think is important, especially as I've been on this path of personal development and kind of realizing that a lot of what kids are taught are the sit down, shut up, listen to me type of approach. I don't really like that. And I think that can lead to another whole host of problems. So, I tried to take a different approach that, rather than telling the kids what to do, like, obviously there's time and place, like, hey, you need to listen because this is dangerous and I don't want you to get hit by a car. Like, sometimes you got to be stern with them. But, at the same time I'd always tell them, like, and these are 5 to 11-year-olds. So I tell them, like, hey, if you don't like something, tell me, but I don't want you to complain about it. I don't want you to say, oh, I don't like this. Like, I want you to come up to me and tell me, what you don't like about this and why. What would you like to see more of? So I was asking for their feedback so I could get a gauge as to what they like and what they enjoy. And some of the kids love to garden. I got some garden boxes there, started planting some stuff. We got, beans, we got wildflowers, got a bunch of different things. And so, some of the kids liked it, some of them didn't. That's okay. I didn't try to force anybody to do anything they didn't. I'd always have them come over and say, hey, you got to be here for at least 10 minutes. And if you don't want to do this, then you can go play, but I want you to at least try it. So I try to, have kids try things. We do yoga, we do Tai Chi, we do some meditation, and kind of scaling it to a children's level that I'm not going to expect them to meditate for 20 minutes and maybe 3 minutes, because their attention spans and their ability to sit still isn't as long. But it was kind of just teaching them things that I wish I was taught and things that work for me as an adult, and tools I think are important to develop at a younger age. One of the things is having them shake their body and kind of go crazy, just because I feel like if I'm stagnant, I shake out, kind of like a little bit, just like shake myself out. Like it's like a reset button. So try to just equip them with some of these tools. And I remember one of the best comments I have from a parent was, she told me, she's like, yeah, I went into my daughter's room last night and I found her doing yoga. And I was like, yes, it worked. And so it's cool to hear those stories. And one of the kids like, oh, Johnny, that wasn't his real name. Johnny said he wanted to start a garden now. So it's like having a lot of these little things. It wasn't all the kids, but just having some of these kids, if I could, my goal was if I could change one kid from one of the things I'm teaching and they start using that tool, that makes a big difference. And especially, there's one kid who had a lot of anger. He was very angry, very easily. And you see, you'd be like play fighting with his dad all the time when he gets there. And it's just like, that's great, but there wasn't like the boundary of like, hey, enough's enough. And so with him, the meditation was a great piece. The breathing was a big piece. So when he'd be angry, I wouldn't feed into it. Like, hey, figure it out. The tools, breathe, take a step back, walk a lap around the playground, like do whatever you got to do. And it just kind of like wouldn't feed into that, which a lot of kids love the attention and kind of giving them the tools. And over the course of a few months, the progression was incredible to see that he'd get angry. He'd sit down, pout for 30 seconds, which used to be like 20 minutes, and then kind of realize like, oh, wait, what? I'm doing this again, and then get up and go back and play. So seeing a lot of these progressions with the kids and just equipping them with the tools, I think is really important. And connecting with nature, we take them a lot of walks, bring them, to climb trees, which some of the other teachers weren't a big fan of, but I was like, hey, I told them, hey, you may get hurt, you may, you could get cut. And some of the kids did get cut. And I, just kind of remind them, hey, this is part of the risk that happens when you do something that's, a little fun and a little risky. Yeah, you may cut yourself on a branch. And that's part of life itself, is if you take a little bit of a risk to go outside the norm, you may get a little cut up. So kind of just teaching them some of these principles that, again, I wish I was taught, and I feel like serve me, and I would like to see our next generation be raised with.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've had some of those same thoughts having been in the teaching world. So I love when I get to hear other people talk like that. And now we want to know where our listeners can go to find out more about you.
Yeah, so I'm most active right now on Instagram and YouTube are my two platforms. YouTube has become my major focus for 2022. I just like the longer form content than Instagram, which I'm not really somebody who just gets on there and is like, hey, like 15 seconds type of thing. As you can see, I tend to go around in circles and kind of come back to the point. So for me, YouTube, Whole Health Connections is my YouTube channel. Instagram is at Whole Health Connections. And then, my website, wholehealthconnects.com. Those are kind of the three platforms that I'm moving forward with, and, always open to chat with anybody, shoot me a message on my Instagram. I always love to chat and connect. So yeah, always happy to connect.
And your free ebooks on your website, correct?
Yep. It's on my website. It's also my Instagram profile. So either way, they can get it there.
And I've looked at it, so check it out. Go get it.
Thank you.
How would you recommend our listeners going about starting their own pirate journey?
I do have a pirate joke as well. I want to share that before we wrap up here, but
that's the next important question.
All right, cool. So starting their own pirate journey, I think it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is embracing discomfort and going beyond that comfort zone first and foremost, which inherently involves some level of risk. Anytime we leave the comfort zone, it's a little bit risky, but I always love the analogy of, there's two images, and one is a lion in a cage, and say this lion has all the food it needs, has the shelter it needs, it has everything it needs to be safe, but it has no freedom. It has no expression, has no way to, go on the edge of life and try new things. And there's a lion in the wild and says, this lion isn't guaranteed food. It isn't guaranteed shelter. It isn't guaranteed whatever, but it has the freedom to try whatever it wants. So if we can recognize, like for me, I want to be the lion that, yeah, maybe there's some days that I'm a little bit hungry. Maybe there's some days I don't have the perfect roof over my head, but I'd rather go through those days to challenge myself and grow than just be in this safe little bubble where, I'm safe, but am I really going to be fulfilled and happy? Probably not. And some people are. Some people, crave safety, but I choose freedom over safety. It tends to be my driving force. And of course, we all want some level of security in a baseline sense. But, I think just going beyond that comfort zone and recognizing that, hey, just because it's not a social norm doesn't mean that it's wrong or untrue for you, because everybody's truth is going to be a little bit different. I think if we can learn to tap into that intuition, to follow what drives us, what motivates us, what makes us happy, and we can do more of that, I think we're going to enjoy life quite a bit more and have more fun doing it. And that will inherently come with more ups and more downs, rather than the streamlined idea of get a job, work for 40 years, retire, which is, more of a straight line, which has up and downs, but they're not as big. But I think that, sometimes having a little bit of an adventure is a lot more fun. And I've always loved the adventure books, and I'm a bit of an adventurer myself. So I think that the more adventures we can have, the better.
All right. So now we're ready. What's the pirate joke you have?
So I had to look up a bunch of different ones, because I was like, off the top of my head, I was like, some of them were really lame, and I still think that there's, they're very cliche, but one I thought was funny, and maybe this is just my middle school humor. But what does a pirate use his cell phone for late at night?
Don't know.
Booty calls.
Booty calls.
I'm like, oh, he just came to me.
I saw that when I laughed, so I was like, that had to be the one to share. So, but I'm glad you got that. That was good.
That's a good one.
My thought was, pirates have cell phones? What do they use it for?
Awesome. Well, this has been really great talking to you, Rob. We want to thank you so much for coming on. And I hope our listeners will go and check you out and give you a follow and see keep abreast of what you're up to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for having me. This has been a great joy to connect with you both. And, it's always a pleasure to connect with the people on a similar path and just share the message that I think we all need to hear, which is, walk to the beat of your own drum, do what makes you happy, and, make yourself better and make the world better at the same time. I think that those things don't need to be separate. We can totally integrate those two together. So I appreciate you both doing the message that you're doing and doing the work that you're doing.
It's rock and roll, guys. There are no rules. This one goes to 11.